Welcome back to Book to Movie Club. My name is Serena, and this week we will be talking about If Beale Street Could Talk. I have been waiting for this moment. I did a poll on my community page about whether I should put out this video or Poor Things first, and I didn't check it. I think like 2 people voted and Poor Things won. And so that video came out first. So I apologize for the 7 of you who wanted to see Poor Things first. Who wanted to see If Beale Street Could Talk first, but here is that video. Before we get into it, last week things got a little spicy in the comment section of the Poor Things video. And I just have to say, I'm just a girl with an opinion, okay? I am not a movie reviewer. I come on here to share my opinion, and you can agree or disagree, but be nice about it, okay? So be nice in the comments and go check out the Poor Things video if you haven't already. Let's jump into If Beale Street Could Talk. So a little bit about the author. If Beale Street Could Talk was written by James Baldwin, who was an American activist and writer. A lot of his writings were about the Black experience and the queer experience for African Americans. He wrote quite a few novels and short stories between 1953 and 1960, and If Beale Street Could Talk is one of his most popular novels, I would say. There's so much more that could be said about James Baldwin. I may not be the best person to say it, so I'll leave some articles in the description so you can learn more about his life. The title of this book is a reference to the song Beale Street Blues by W.C. Handy. And if you saw the quote at the beginning of my video, you'll see that James Baldwin talked a bit more about what the idea of Beale Street meant to him. If Beale Street Could Talk was Baldwin's 5th novel, published in 1974 by Dial Press. I'm going to quickly read a synopsis of If Beale Street Could Talk from Storygraph. Told through the eyes of Tish, a 19-year-old girl in love with Fonny, a young sculptor who is the father of her child, Baldwin's story mixes the sweet and the sad. Tish and Fonny have pledged to get married, but Fonny is falsely accused of a terrible crime and imprisoned. Their family set out to clear his name, and as they face an uncertain future, the young lovers experience a kaleidoscope of emotions, despair, and hope. In a love story that evokes the blues, where passion and sadness are inevitably intertwined, Baldwin has created 2 characters so alive and profoundly realized that they are unforgettably ingrained in the American psyche. And that is true because this book and movie have been my Roman Empire since 2018. So it's embedded in here for life. In an article published by Gawker in 2015, Stasia L. Brown wrote, Beale Street belonged to a collection of literature that seeks to humanize Black men through their relationships with parents, lovers, siblings, and children. It swan dives from optimism to bleakness and rises from the ashes of dashed hopes. And I feel like that is the perfect description of this book. I think this goes without saying, but this is obviously a fantastic book. This was actually, in preparation for this video, I listened to the audiobook, and I had read the physical book back in 2017 or 2018 before the movie came out, in preparation for the movie's release, of course. And both times it shook me to my core. I was left heartbroken and sad, crying by myself. And that's just what this book and this story does to you. It's so emotional and yet so beautiful. The beauty of this book is the way that Baldwin writes about love. And it's not just the love between Fonny and Tish, which I think is beautiful, of course, but the love between parents and children and family and all of the things that come up as they're trying to work to get this young man out of prison. More specifically, I think the love between Fonny and his father is such a highlight for me as I was reading this book, and one of the most heartbreaking storylines of this book. This is going to be a spoiler for the book. I'm assuming you've probably already read it if you're watching this video, or you don't plan on reading it. But if you do, I don't want to spoil it for you, so skip to here so that you don't get any spoilers. But Fonny's family is in a very interesting mix of characters, and which is shown very clearly in the film. But it's also spoken about a bit more in the in the book. And Fonny's dad, they really like cling to each other, for lack of a better word, because they're ostracized by his mother and his sisters. And so you can see the love that Fonny's dad has for him throughout the book. and kind of the desperation that he has to try and get his son out of prison. So much so that he tries to steal from his job so that he can pay for the lawyers and all the fees required to try and get his son out of prison. In doing so, he gets caught. And at the end of the book ends by sharing that he has taken his own life. And I can't imagine the sadness and the anger and the grief that he must have felt as he was trying to get his son out and stealing from his job. And I can't even, it makes me emotional even thinking about it, because he loved his son so much. And from my interpretation, he could not live with the thought of his son being in prison and not having a way to help him. It's truly heartbreaking. It's really sad. The heartache that reading this brought for me is indescribable, and I cried both in reading the original, the first time in 2017 or 2018, and in listening to the audiobook. So go read it. If you didn't know about that part, go read the book, because obviously it's better than what I'm telling you. I have one note about Baldwin's style of writing. Obviously it's unique and it's beautiful, but this book only has 2 chapters in it. And it's, I think, a little under 200 pages. And most of this book is just 1 chapter. So if you're a slow reader like me who gets easily distracted and needs some parameters around reading, it might take you a little bit longer to get through it, just because there's no stop and start. You start and then you're on this ride until you finish the book. So that's the only thing that I really think is important to note. There's 2 chapters, so that might not be important for most people, but it was something that I was like, when does this chapter end? It doesn't. So I've only read one other book by Baldwin, which is Giovanni's Room, which I also absolutely enjoyed and hope becomes a movie one day, because I would love to see that translated to film as well. But yeah, I'm hoping to also read a few more of his books this year. Maybe one more. A few more in the future. So maybe we'll talk a bit more about that when that happens. But until then, let's get into the movie. Now, I could talk about this movie for hours. I won't hold you for that long. But bear with me as I just dive into the love that I have for this film. The film, If Beale Street Could Talk, was released in 2018 and was adapted for screen and directed by Barry Jenkins. And of course, I have to give a shout out to the cinematographer, James Laxton. He really put his foot into this movie. Everybody did. The editors, Barry, obviously, James. The visuals for this film are fantastic, and watching this movie really awakened the love that I have for cinematography. I don't think I realized how important cinematography was for a film until I watched If Beale Street Could Talk. The visuals are fantastic. The opening scene, when you see the trees and how green and vibrant they are, and then Fonnie and Tish walk onto the scene and their matching blue and yellow outfits, their melanin popping like no other. I wish I could I wish I could have that image tattooed onto my brain, so every time I close my eyes, I just see that image, because it's truly amazing. And I think it's a shame if you were not able to see this movie in theaters. It's really a shame, because I rewatched it on TV last night in preparation for this video. And I was watching it with my boyfriend, and he was seeing it for the first time. And he completely agrees that the cinematography is amazing. But I was just like, you should have been there. The whole time in my head, I was like, I wish you were seeing this in theaters, because it changed my life, if we're being honest. Another way this movie changed my life was by introducing me to Coleman Domingo and Brian Tyree Henry. I'm like, let me get his name right. These 2 actors were phenomenal in this film. And, we're going to go into the accolades a little bit, but Regina King was nominated and won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress in this movie. And me and my boyfriend were talking about this yesterday. Coleman Domingo and Aujane Ellis Taylor? Can't remember her whole name, but they both should have been nominated. Coleman Domingo's acting in this film, it made me fall in love with him. And ever since, I've been watching everything he's ever done, and I couldn't be happier. It's really the greatest joy of my life is seeing that man act. But the cast in general, the casting, oh my God. Is there an acting for casting directors? Because is there an Oscar for casting directors? Because the casting of this film was fantastic. It was spectacular. And what a treat to see all these amazing Black actors in one film. Oh my God, it's so good. I truly think this movie is the perfect example of how to adapt a book for the screen. And again, if you see my comments in my Poor Things video, people are like, that's not the point of an adaptation. It's not the point to perfectly stick to the book, which this movie didn't. It was slightly different. It was mostly the same. But when you love a book, I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, politely, I would imagine that you would want the film to stick as close to the source material as possible. And I think this film did it. And then it expanded on some of the themes perfectly. One theme that it expanded on was how Black men are impacted by the criminal justice system in America. And I think that is a really important, not only is it important to the book, but it was important to James Baldwin in his life, as far as I know, as an activist. And so I feel like they really hit the nail on the head by choosing to expand on that point. And it was beautifully done. There were some changes made in the film that I think were made to make the film a little more optimistic than the book. I think the book is sadder. As I mentioned, the father taking his own life obviously makes the book a lot sadder than the movie, which is already sad. So it feels hard to beat, but it is. Another slight change that they made in the film was kind of toning down the story that Fonny's friend Daniel is telling him when they're catching up. He has spent 2 years in prison, and in the book, he is so sad telling Fonny about his experience of being assaulted by the guards in prison. And it's heartbreaking. And in the movie, it feels a little more lighthearted. It isn't joyful, obviously. This is a really sad experience that he's telling him, and you see that, but it doesn't go as deep in the movie as it does in the book, which I think is a shame. I think seeing Brian Tyree Henry really go as deep as the character in the book did would have been beautifully heartbreaking, but a really an Oscar-worthy performance if it had been in the movie. I just want everyone to get awards. Oh, back to that. I didn't tell you. So this film was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Original Score, and Best Supporting Actress at the 91st Academy Awards. It also received multiple nominations at the 76 Golden Globes and the 24th Critics' Choice Awards. And the film was included in the top 10 films of 2018 by the National Board of Review and the American Film Institute. So all the accolades, not enough, in my opinion. I don't know who it was up against that year. Maybe it was up against some really great films, who knows? But I think this deserves every award. Oh, God, I love this movie. Last note about the film, in rewatching it, I streamed it, I rented it from Apple TV, and the audio was a bit weird. The main character, Tish, is very soft-spoken, and there are points in time when you cannot understand what she's saying. We had to turn the captions on. I don't know if it was us, if it was them, or if that's how it was in the theater. I'm trying to recall if that was an issue, but being in the theater, you're surrounded by speakers, so I assume not. But that is one change that I would make. I think adjusting the background audio so it was a little lower so that you could hear what the people were saying was necessary. But anyway, the movie's already made and I love it, so it doesn't matter. So now we've come to the point where I ask myself which is better, and I cannot answer that question. This, as I said, this is the perfect adaptation of a book, and I have no notes besides the audio note. I think it's beautifully done, and I think they're just great companions. Like, if you've read the book, you're going to love this movie, and if you love the movie, you need to read the book. They just go hand in hand. So that's my opinion. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm going to do another poll on my community tab and actually listen to your opinions. I'm trying to decide what the next video should be. What day is it? I actually think it's going to be The Color Purple. Never mind. Next week, we're going to be talking about The Color Purple, comparing all of the things. The book, the movie from the 80s, the movie just released this year / last year, depending on what country you're in. Don't get me started with that. And the stage musical, which I have had the opportunity to see twice. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it, and I'll see you then.